I've spent the past year listening back through dozens of hours of recordings I made on the Mongol Rally, reliving all the adventures I had while I was on the road. And one thing I've noticed is that many of the situations I experienced one way in the heat of the moment look totally different in hindsight. Take, for example, our initial impression of the mechanic we went to in Bukhara, Uzbekistan.
This is so much more professional than some of the little repair shops we've been to. I feel like if anyone could repair our car, it's these guys in this shop.
Hearing myself now, it's hard not to roll my eyes, because it only took a few days before we totally reassessed the situation.
When we first pulled into that garage, they had all the cars there. It looked very professional. I thought our car was in good hands. Now I kind of don't think it was.
You see, our car was running once again, but it was noisier than it used to be. It didn't seem as powerful, and it was now blowing smoke out of the exhaust. As we drove out of town, my brother and I discussed the situation. We knew this was a tough case, so we wanted to cut the guys at the garage some slack, but it was hard not to be frustrated.
The mechanic kept coming up with all these excuses, just saying like, oh, your car is old, it has many problems. And it's like they have Ladas here. The Russian car is just notorious for having issues. Yeah. And they have Ladas here that are 30 years old in the garage that they're getting running fine. And they're telling us that they can't get a Nissan going. Just kept coming up with sort of excuse after excuse. Oh, you don't have good gas in the car. Well, either Rosie and Jane, they're running the same car as us. Their car is running absolutely fine.
To me, when he says, oh, your car is old, it has a lot of problems, that sounds like him just throwing up his hands and saying, I don't know what to do. That's the extent of my knowledge.
I don't think that's the extent of my knowledge so much as that's how much I want to help you.
No, if we were willing to pay him, I'm sure he'd do whatever we wanted. I think he just doesn't know, or maybe he doesn't know Nissans very well. I'm sure that's part of it.
I'm sure that's it, yeah.
He just didn't know how to fix it better than they did. The farther we get out there, the less experienced and knowledgeable these people are going to be.
So much for buying a car that can be fixed anywhere.
That's what we were told. We were told, get a Japanese car, get a Nissan.
I wouldn't get a Micra again.
You were in love with the Micra.
Yeah, when it worked.
I'm Scott Gurian. I'm a longtime public radio and print reporter, and I've created this podcast called Far From Home to document the unexpected adventures and chance encounters I have with interesting people around the world. To start off, I'm telling the story of a massive road trip my brother and I took with our friends, raising money for charity. We drove nearly 11,000 miles.
11,000?
That's right, a quarter of the way around the Earth, from London to Mongolia, through 18 countries, 8 time zones, 5 mountain ranges, and a few deserts, in a ridiculously tiny car.
It's like the Beverly Hillbillies.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It's the adventure, isn't it? It's just the thing of pushing yourself to the absolute limit, because I think it's going to take us out of our comfort zone, but in a really good way.
If you're just joining me, I suggest you first go back and listen to all the previous episodes in order to get up to speed and for all of this to make a bit more sense. From language barriers to car trouble, getting horribly lost to paying bribes to shady traffic cops, it's been quite an amazing experience, and over the coming episodes, I'll be bringing all of you along with me for the ride. When I left off last episode, we had just spent over a week waiting for our car to get repaired, and we really couldn't spare any more time. So, against our better judgment, we decided to continue on, keeping our fingers crossed that our mechanical issues would improve. And you know what? After a little while, that smoke coming from our tailpipe eventually went away. We'd been feeling kind of restless, and had frankly gotten a bit sick of Uzbekistan, so it felt great to finally leave. On the way out, immigration officials looked through our bags and asked to see the photos we took and even the social media accounts on our cell phones, conducting an extremely thorough search for who knows what. The whole experience left me feeling totally violated, so it was a big relief when they finally sent us on our way. Crossing into Tajikistan turned out to be a really simple process for a change. We'd read that it was the poorest country in Central Asia, so we were pleasantly surprised that the road from the border was freshly paved and even well lit in places. It was easily the smoothest drive we'd had in weeks, and it totally spoiled us since the roads we'd encounter in the coming days were about to get much worse. Although we had set out early in the morning, it wasn't until well after midnight by the time we arrived at our hotel in Tajikistan's capital, Dushanbe. Thankfully, our trip was mostly uneventful, but knowing that we had some pretty rough driving ahead of us, my brother paid a visit the next morning to a local mechanic someone had recommended. A few hours later, he came back and brought me up to speed.
It's a tiny little garage. It's great though. There's 3 other rally cars there. Another one that has to have a new head gasket put in. Another one that has a bad engine. Very nice guy. He lived in San Francisco. He speaks very good English.
Cool. And he seemed like he knew what he was doing.
He did, and the fact that multiple rally cars were there made me feel better about it, but he also explained everything and had another guy go and get the piece to show me sort of what the issue was. But basically, I told him the 2 issues that we were having. The one that it sounds like a race car right now because we think there's a hole in the exhaust, which he said is not a problem at all. He could weld that together today. But the other issue is when I started the engine, the air filter was filled with oil.
How did oil get in the air filter?
Because the pistons in the engine, the big metal cylindrical things that push up and down in the engine, they have these little metal seals around them, around the edges. He said that probably when we overheated, they not corroded, but they sort of maybe fused to the rest of the metal, so they're not doing their job as they should. So what's happening, instead of it keeping the oil in the engine, it's actually pushing oil up into the intake. And when he pulled out the dipstick for the oil as well, it was smoking out of there. So basically it's burning a lot of oil. Yeah. He could tell immediately. He asked who put together the engine, and he said that it was likely a very bad job.
Yeah. And it was probably the best option we had in that place in Bukhara.
Well,
we were told that was the only one that
we
could deal with Nissans.
Yeah. We went to the one place that could put together and take apart a Nissan engine.
Yeah.
And they did a rush job, and they didn't spend the time that they needed to take apart the engine properly and look at all of the pieces. He asked to see pictures of what they did, and we couldn't tell what exactly they did in the engine, but he suspects that they didn't mess with that at all. And because of that, it's pushing oil up. So essentially, he needs to take apart the engine, which he can't do.
Again, yes.
Yeah, he said bare minimum, it would be 2 to 2.5 days. That's if he has the parts, and if not, it would be a week. Which I said, we don't have the time to do that. We've already spent a week in Bukhara, and he totally understood that. He's recommending we bring 10 liters of oil with us. When you can give the car a rest, find a beautiful place and let it rest for an hour if you have a crazy climb during a day. But other than that, just monitor the oil. I won't say he felt overly confident that we'll make it, but he thought we could do it.
So, not exactly a ringing endorsement of our car's fitness for duty, and we didn't even bother asking him about some of the more minor problems we'd been experiencing, like the fact that our horn kept cutting out. Still, it was somewhat encouraging, because the next few days of our journey would be some of the most challenging yet. You see, we were about to set off on the Pamir Highway, a more than 600-mile stretch of mountainous road that wasn't really a highway at all, since much of the route was unpaved and rocky, having been damaged by earthquakes, landslides, and erosion over the years. From Dushanbe, we'd head east and then follow the path along Tajikistan's southern border with Afghanistan before looping back north into Kyrgyzstan on what was considered one of the highest, most spectacular, and potentially dangerous roads in the world. Now, as you might imagine, even under normal circumstances, this would really put our car to the test. So, in light of the mechanical issues we'd been facing, we set 2 ground rules to be extra cautious. First, we'd try to avoid driving after dark, and second, we would caravan with several other rally teams so there could be more safety in numbers. It just so happened that there were a bunch of other ralliers staying in a place nearby, so Drew and Jane stopped there to try to round people up. Later in the afternoon, they returned with an update.
So we went over to the hostel, and there's probably at least 25, 30 people from the rally. So we just kind of showed up there and said hi to a few people. Really cool scene and all that, but I sort of felt like an imposter. Like we're these outsiders walking in and trying to mix things up.
Why are we messing things up?
Not messing things up, but we haven't been convoying with any of them, and we just show up and say, hey, can we convoy with you? You know, and it's just a little weird.
Yeah.
Jane chimed in.
And these people are now, they've all gelled together as a big group, they're all cooking together, they're eating, drinking together. It's a very intimate group. And, we kind of are sitting on the periphery of that. I just really hope that a few of these teams are ready to go tomorrow because they're a brilliant group, aren't they?
They seem like a good group of people. It's just like, for instance, somebody asked them when they were going, they're like, we don't have any plan, we have no time, we need to be back, we'll go whenever, or we'll stay here for a while. Like they were totally chill about it, which is not who we're looking to combo with because they're not going anywhere fast.
Some people told them they were waiting for one of the other teams that was still getting their car fixed, and they thought they'd probably hit the road at some point the next day, but there wasn't a sense of urgency. We, on the other hand, faced a bit of a time crunch after our week-long delay in Uzbekistan, since we had to get back on track in order to arrive at the endpoint in Russia to catch our flights home. Things didn't sound promising. We'd been hoping to find at least one or two other groups to join us on this next leg of our journey, but now Rosie acknowledged that might not be possible.
I mean, we can't force anybody. If we're running out of time, we haven't got a choice. We've got to go by ourselves.
Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
How does that work with our absolute drop dead? We are not doing this. Just us two cars. That's what we've said from the very beginning.
I know.
And that concerns me greatly.
Well, that was for you and your anxiety around the Afghan border.
No, I think it was because of the dangerous roads. We are on dangerous roads. Are you telling me, this isn't dangerous?
I'm not saying it isn't dangerous, and of course I don't know because I'm not there, but my understanding is that
We went back and forth on this issue, but in the end, Rosie's argument won out. If we were hoping to make it to the finish line by our deadline, we really had to get going, no matter what. So, after returning to the hostel the following morning and still not having any luck recruiting fellow travelers, we decided the show must go on. We didn't make it very far before we experienced our first interesting challenge.
So we are somewhere in central Tajikistan. My brother and I were driving, and Jane and Rosie were following a bit behind us. And suddenly they got on the walkie-talkie and told us they were stopping, and we didn't know what was going on. We were way ahead. So we parked, we waited for about 5 minutes, and we realized that they had gotten pulled over by a cop who we didn't even see there. And so my brother and I turned back around, and it looks like the cops are trying to write them a ticket. We saw one of the cops just use a little radar gun, capture the speed of another car, and then show it to them, and it looked like he was trying to make it look like the speed that the other car was going was how fast their car was going.
Complicating matters was the fact that neither of them spoke a word of English. My brother and I walked over to ask Rosie what was going on. She insisted Jane wasn't speeding. The police are trying to scam us, and this is bollocks, she said.
We just keep on playing dumb,
Yeah.
and we keep on asking for a translator. And you got somebody on the telephone, but we didn't understand them.
One of the officers handed my brother his cell phone and put it on speaker so we could all listen in to the person on the other end of the line.
Hello? Wait, what? Hold on 1 second, a car is passing.
It was really hard to hear.
Say that again? How much? I cannot understand.
$100, he repeated.
We do not have that. No.
don't have it.
We do not have. We're tourists driving. We're
Students.
Yeah, we're students. We're in university.
He laughed, clearly not believing us. I can't help you, he said. It was pretty clear this whole thing was a ruse, because not only hadn't Rosie and Jane been speeding, but the fine seemed awfully high for a place like this. In fact, I just looked it up, and $100 is almost as much as an average Tajik worker makes in an entire month. Though, obviously, if you have the sort of job where you can extort money from tourists, you might make a lot more. Now, I will say none of this came as a big surprise to any of us, because we'd heard stories from other teams of this sort of thing happening. In fact, even before we started, Mongol Rally co-founder Jules Ingram had given me some tips for how to deal with situations like this.
We reiterate 1,000 times, never ever pay a bribe to anyone for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's not fair to whoever's driving behind you because they're going to get stung for the same bribe. And secondly, just because someone's asking you for money doesn't mean they deserve it. There's 101 different ways you can avoid paying bribes. For example, when they stick their hand out in an authoritative way, asking for money, if you just take whatever rubbish you've got on your dashboard and just put it in their hand with a smile, and just keep doing that again and again and again, they get so fed up they'll wave you on. Or, for example, giving cheap little souvenir trinkets from back home, like Union Jack pens and Big Ben lighters and stuff like that goes a long way. to saving you your precious dollars. But yeah, I mean, that even turns into a bit of a game after a while, and it can be quite fun.
Other teams had also shared their favorite tactics with us, which ranged from constantly claiming you don't understand to having a female member of your team pretend to break down in tears, to my personal favorite, when the police officer doesn't speak your language, just launch into telling some sort of pointless, never-ending story until he gets totally bored and gives up trying to make you pay. Whatever you do, it requires a lot of patience, so while Jane was ready to throw in the towel after only a few minutes, Rosie insisted we wait this one out.
You're told time after time after time, Jane, do not give them anything.
Right. Is there something we can give them?
Nothing. It's not going to make it go away.
Because then they want more.
They'll just radio ahead and we'll get the same thing. Stand your ground and you don't give in.
No, go to Dushanbe. We go this way. English. I don't understand.
100 bucks.
We don't have $100. I understand you're threatening us, but we don't have.
Don't laugh.
Just then, another rally team drove up the road. We told them to stay away for their own good.
Keep going!
The translator guy called back, and the cop handed the phone to my brother again.
Hello. Yes.
They're telling me that if you don't pay, they'll take your documents and send them to the police station in Dushanbe, he warned.
Sir, they are threatening us right now.
We went around in circles like this for 15 or 20 minutes without making much progress. Rosie still thought that giving them cash was out of the question, but maybe, she figured, there was another form of currency they'd accept. She opened the trunk and rummaged through her suitcase, returning a moment later holding a bottle.
You know and I know we're not speeding, okay? You give us the documents, I'll give you that, we go, okay? This is good vodka, we've been drinking this vodka.
The guy in the phone was still listening in and he laughed. The police officers smiled but resisted, holding out hope that they could still strike a better deal.
Oh, come on, we have not got $100, we need to go there.
Finally realizing that they were unlikely to get the full amount, the cops began lowering their price.
Now, here at $50 on a piece of paper.
Oh, it was originally 100, now it's 50?
Let's keep it down like we don't
That's
understand.
how it worked.
Yeah.
Well, I think if it's already dropping it, I think we could just wait him out.
The guy on the phone spoke up again. If you have any money, give it to them and they'll leave you alone, he said. Jane decided she'd had enough.
This is because we are tourists. This is because we are from another country that they think they can take money from us. This is wrong. This is very wrong. You must tell them this because they are supposed to be encouraging tourism in this country and they are actually doing the opposite. This is something that if this happens, we will report this when we get back home. This is not good. This is very, very much not good.
I'm sorry.
He sheepishly apologized and asked Jane to hand the phone back to the police officers. The three men chatted amongst themselves for a few minutes, trying to figure out how to handle us. Drew was about to threaten to call the American embassy, when finally they caved.
Now he's changing his mind.
Excellent.
He's taking
Thank
your
you.
vodka. Goodbye.
Bye.
That was fun.
Rosie had joked that as we continued heading east, the quality of the vodka would be inversely proportional to the increasingly poor state of the roads. Now, I'm not a big drinker, so I can't really comment on the first part of that, but it's clear that our driving conditions were definitely getting a lot rougher. After we passed through a checkpoint into an autonomous region in the eastern part of the country, the pavement ended, the potholes got bigger, and the roads steeper.
So we are on the Palmyra Highway alongside these giant mountains with a huge valley below. And the road, that's still sort of 2 lanes. We're just worried.
We're not 2 lanes, you just gotta
We're worried.
use our horn is working.
Yeah. Well,
That was especially important to notify other drivers as we went around blind curves with no guardrails whatsoever.
Honk now. Keep it going.
Okay. You know, I have to say, this has been my biggest fear all along as I was learning stick and everything. If we were on a 1-lane road on the side of a cliff and suddenly there was a truck coming the other way and we had to back up.
That's your biggest fear?
Yes, definitely.
Thankfully, I'd grown more comfortable shifting gears by this point in our trip. As we continued, the highway wound through a narrow pass with sheer cliff faces towering above us on either side. We pulled over to take some photos.
So we are stopped at the side of the road here, and right behind us there's kids playing a big volleyball game here. Little shacks, cows roaming around. There's a river right next to us. And then on the other side, that is Afghanistan.
Most of the land across the river seemed uninhabited, but there were a few small villages where we could see people walking along a gravel path and kids playing soccer on the beach. They were within shouting distance, but they didn't seem to notice us.
It's extraordinary to think that that's Afghanistan when you think of everything that that name conjures up. It all looks no different from this side.
Yeah.
Of course, there was a big difference in perception, because if you tell your friends and family members you're going to Tajikistan, that probably won't mean much to them. But when you say you're going near Afghanistan, they'll suddenly get really worried for your safety. And to be honest, we were a little anxious ourselves, but we felt a bit better after we saw how the two countries were separated.
What class rapids do you think those are?
Definitely 5.
That's like some serious rapids.
Yeah. If you fell in there, that would be almost certain death.
If any of you were thinking of illegally trying to sneak across the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan across this raging river, don't try it.
We'd unfortunately gotten a bit of a late start from Dushanbe, so we were trying to make it as far as we could to make up for lost time, but now it was starting to get dark. And what's more,
we thought we smelled some smoke from the engine, so we just stopped to check because we've been having some radiator issues yet again. We thought everything was fixed around our way, but now the water still seems to be disappearing out of the overflow tank really quickly. So we're keeping a close eye on that. We're stopping every once in a while to refill it.
we were all pretty tired and hungry, but we were in the middle of nowhere, so there wasn't really anywhere to pull over for the night. We did see some sort of roadside eatery on Google Maps that we thought might make a good place to stop, but that turned out to be a mirage. As we rounded a corner, I radioed back to Rosie and Jane, who were trailing a bit behind us.
So the good news is we're back on the paved road. The bad news is that the place that we had on the map where it showed the restaurant, we passed it just a short while ago. It clearly wasn't there, so we don't know exactly how far we're going now.
Well, we've got good roads. We keep going until we find somewhere because we can't stop here.
Yeah, obviously, we're just going to have to continue on.
This is not good at all, True said.
Look on the map and see if there's anything that looks like the town coming up. I'm going to guess no.
I didn't see many options on the GPS.
Abdara, that looks like that's on the Afghan side. Zigar, Z-I-G-A-R. That's kind of a ways up, but that's tiny letters, so it's not going to be much of a town.
I'm going to keep going until we get somewhere. We just don't know where that somewhere is.
Yeah.
So basically, it's 8 o'clock at night right now. We're on the Tajik-Afghan border. Afghanistan is probably 200 feet to our right. Our car is having issues. We're with one other team. And not at all what we planned to do tonight.
Yeah, this is kind of exactly what we were hoping to avoid. It could be worse. Again, at least this road is well paved, surprisingly.
Right now it is.
So we're lucky in that regard. There's a few occasional cars on the road, so we're not totally alone. What is this? 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 Stop here. Stop here. Let's see. I don't know. Let's stop and see.
Right when we least expected it, a building with neon lights emerged out of the darkness.
What is this?
Maybe a homestay. I don't know.
Hello.
Totally out of nowhere. This is crazy.
Okay.
Let's see what this is. There's music here. Where in the world are we?
A young kid walked up to welcome us.
This is a hotel.
It's a hotel.
Oh.
How much for rooms?
Hotel turned out to be a bit of an exaggeration. What it was a private house where an old man lived, but it was also a sort of rest stop where they fed hungry travelers and let them sleep under the stars on these wooden platforms out back for a small amount of money.
We have sleeping bags. At least it's somewhere safe to stay for the night.
The kid's name was Makdi, and he was the old man's 16-year-old grandson. He'd learned English while going to school in Dushanbe, but now he'd returned to help run the family business. I told him my brother and I were from New York, and he said he dreamed of going there one day. He offered us some hot tea and dinner and showed us where there was a pipe carrying fresh spring water from the mountains so we could wash up for the night. The power went out around 10 o'clock, so we called it an early evening. I woke early the next morning to the sound of women sweeping away leaves that had fallen from the mulberry trees overnight. In the daylight, I was able to get a much better view of our surroundings, and here's what I saw. Amid this barren, rocky landscape was a small patch of greenery where these people were basically living off the land. They had a big vegetable garden and trees growing every kind of fruit imaginable, including these tiny maroon-colored figs that were terribly delicious. They gave us a big bowl of them for breakfast, and I couldn't stop eating them. It was a really special, unexpected moment, because as Rosie mentioned to me, when we'd been driving the night before, we never in our wildest dreams imagined we'd end up in a place like this.
I mean, Jane was sitting there, because we saw the lights on the Afghan side, and she's going, "You know the snipers up there, don't you? The snipers." I said, "There are no snipers up there. There are people camping. What are people doing camping? The only people that would be camping would be snipers." So she's putting the fear of God into both of us as we're going along this tiny little narrow road with this looming great big cliffs. I mean, they were just extraordinary. And every so often we thought we were going through a tunnel because it seemed that the road was running out, but then there would just be a very, a
curved
bend.
so sharply,
absolutely.
the mountains in the dark, you couldn't tell.
And that river, you could feel the power of the river because it was just so intense. And the whole thing was intense. It was that moment of, here we are breaking all of our rules. We're not convoying with anybody. We're driving in the dark on the Pamir Highway. And then you turn and you see these lights and there's this awful disco music pumping out and, an amazing little oasis in the middle of it all. Incredible.
Trying to take it all in, she couldn't help but get a bit emotional.
This is what you were hoping for in the whole trip.
I think so. I don't know. Happy tears. I've been overwhelmed by the fact that we're standing in sight of Afghanistan in a mountain spring in the morning with pomegranate trees over the top of us, eating fresh figs. I mean, it's what travel's all about, isn't it?
If you visit my website, you could see photos from our drive along the Pamir Highway and check out the amazing views we had of Afghanistan just across the river. I've also posted some helpful tips in case you ever get pulled over and asked to pay a bribe. You can find it all at farfromhomepodcast.org. I want to give a special shout out this time to Tascam, whose digital audio recorders I used throughout my journey. If you're curious to learn more, I've linked to a great profile Tascam just wrote about how I made this podcast. Next time on the show,
we've been waiting at the side of the road for over an hour now, hoping to find a passing truck to hopefully at least tow our car back up to the main road, and not a single car or truck has passed in that entire time, so we're definitely out there in the wilderness.
And it becomes increasingly hard to remain a glass half full kind of guy.
I suppose there's worse places to break down.
There's not that many I can think of.
Remember, you could follow Far From Home Podcast on Facebook or Instagram, or follow me, Scott Gurian, on Twitter to get updates and bonus content for this show. You could also go to farfromhomepodcast.org to sign up for my email newsletter. As always, thanks to the Public Radio Exchange for podcast hosting and technical support. There are more than 250,000 podcasts, and new ones are coming out all the time. This is crazy, but I just realized I'm subscribed to over 200 shows, and I know I'm never going to get a chance to listen to them all. So where do you even begin? Well, if you get the Radio Public app, you'll get personalized suggestions picked especially for your listening tastes. So definitely check that out. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Jane and I don't know why it is, but we bring out the mischievous sense in both of us. I mean, we went away to India for our 50th birthdays, and we hadn't even been in the country 24 hours, and Jane fell in a ditch after too many margaritas. And, all Alan can say is, well, that's my girls. We just managed to find trouble, even when we're not actively looking for it.